Oh, God, you know what? I love it here. I love it over here. I love being 54. I highly recommend it. I found certainly my late 40s were really tough.
The World as It Should Be from Prima Donna.
Sam Baker is a journalist, broadcaster and author. She's edited and written for magazines including Company, Chat and Take a Break, and is former editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan and Red. She's also written for other publications including The Guardian, Sunday Times and Stylist.
Sam has judged the Women's Prize of Fiction, the Costa Novel Award and the British Book Awards. She is the author of 4 novels and 1 work of non-fiction, The Shift, which seeks to give a voice to women over 40.
Marion Keyes said of The Shift, "I need this book. We all need this book. If menopause happened to men, there would be celebrations and parties every time one of them completed their change." I love this quote so much. Welcome to the Prima Donna podcast, Sam.
Thank you for having me. I'm loving your little double act.
We're working on it.
I'm not sure if it's Laurel and Hardy or Abbott Costello. I don't know. So as you know, this podcast focuses on the world as it should be. So we ask our guests to name 3 ways in which they change the world if they could. Your first answer is fascinating. You suggest that we should stop shaming women for being over 40. In what ways do you think we do?
Well, I have to say that my first urge was just to say, I think we should eliminate the patriarchy, Donald Trump and sausages, and life would be grand. And then I thought, and probably everybody says, let's just eliminate the patriarchy, so I've got to think of something else.
Yeah, but also everyone loves sausages, so...
Oh, I have a bad sausage experience from when I was little.
We might come back to this.
Anyway, yes, age shaming women over 40. I think it's one of those things that you obviously don't realise how bad ageism is until you get there yourself. And I was so shocked at the speed, particularly say mid-late 40s onwards, at the speed at which I seem to be vanishing. When I spoke to, this was long before I thought I need to write a book about this and kind of get this out there. It's just, I hardly know where to start. From the fashion industry, which thinks you either cease to exist or only want to buy your clothes from the catalogues, that are sold in the back of the Daily Telegraph, through the beauty industry that thinks, everything is about pretending you're not old, the advertising industry that thinks you don't exist, to workplaces which are just trying to sideline you out. It's just absolutely astonishing. And of course, it applies to men too. But as somebody I was speaking to said yesterday, let someone else write that book. Let's talk about women.
I also wonder if it's not as blatantly obvious with men. I don't know.
Well, men are silver foxes, aren't they? Women are old bags, bossy old cows, they're grannies. Men are silver foxes. They have gravitas. So men don't vanish at 50. They become CEOs and company directors. But I remember when I was editing Red and I was 45 and I looked up and thought, what next? I thought, oh, nothing next. Everybody's gone.
That's really interesting. And when you got such an amazing career in magazines and journalism, what have you noticed over the years about women, and how did you try and empower women that you worked with?
Well, oh gosh. The thing that I always loved about editing magazines was the tapping into a kind of identifying a need and tapping into it. So those moments when, editing a magazine right the way through from just 17 through to Red and then on to the Pool and now the Shift, was that people, was when you got letters and emails and tweets from people saying, my God, it's like you're in my head. And so that's kind of, I feel like I spent my career trying to give voice to those things that were going on in women's lives, but kept getting pushed onto a back burner. That's what I hope I did anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you've made a difference, but do you feel like things are changing or have changed for the better?
Well, yes, of course. But it does often feel like we take, 2 steps forward and 1.5 steps back. I interviewed Kate Moss of the Women's Prize fame, and she said you know, it was a factor of working in the office in the 80s that women were expected to manage sexual harassment and sexual assault and, you know, a bit of groping by the photocopier. For other women, they were expected to not put themselves in that situation. They were expected to just tell other women not to get in a lift with him, you know, all of those things. And it was really, well, I suppose it was until Anita Hill that nobody even talked about sexual harassment. Sexual harassment wasn't even a thing. So I am waffling wildly.
No, you're
Sorry.
not at all. It's fascinating. I was actually wondering if you've experienced it and what happened.
Oh, I mean, I'm about to really sound my age, but just standard office groping, mansplaining, making the tea, you know.
I love how we call it standard. You know,
it was standard.
Yeah, but it was.
I think the point really, and it's really what made me think we need to start speaking out about menopause and the way women over 40 and 50 are treated in the workplace, for instance, was that I started working with millennial women. And there was no way they would put up with that shit. You know, they weren't putting up with any sexual harassment in the workplace, certainly not young women working in media. And there's no way that they'll put up with that menopause shit when their time comes.
So in your book, The Shift, you name check lots and lots of people, but writers specifically like Germaine Greer, who wrote a book on the menopause. How important do you think it is that we, as you have, write about this stuff and put it out there?
I think it's really important. I mean, it's very interesting. You speak to women who are slightly older than me. So I'm 54. If you speak to women in their 60s, they are very likely to say things like, oh, no, you don't want to go on about that because, you know, it makes us look weedy. It makes men think that we're not up to the job. And then you speak to women, younger women, they're like, no, I've got my period. I've got chronic cramp. I need to work from home. You know, back in the days when we didn't work from home all the time anyway. And I think, you know, we need to normalize it. I mean, I want to know if Nicola Sturgeon is menopausal. You know, I want to know, I really want to know what Kamala Harris does about hot flushes.
I think there's an intergenerational lesson to be learned as well. I remember reading Germaine Greer when I was in my 20s because I wrote about her for my studies, and reading her book The Change and just feeling like, what is she going on about? Like, it was a massive educational turn for me, and it you know, that kind of exchange is really important so that women can support other women of different ages and different experiences, either at work or outside of work.
I think one of the most cheering things that, you know, I mean, the Shift, the book and the podcast had a massive response, but one of the most cheering things was when younger women, you know, like my literary agent is 30, Emma Gannon, who's 30, both said that they felt the book really made them feel much better equipped to what was coming for them. And I think, you know, there's a tendency to dismiss both upwards and downwards, I think, cross-generationally. I mean, we're seeing that happen a bit at the moment. And there's so much that we can all learn from each other. I definitely feel like I've become more outspoken because of working with younger millennial women. And, you know, like Helen Mirren says that she wished that she said fuck an awful lot more times, an awful lot younger. And, you know.
Can I tell you quickly my Germaine Greer anecdote, because I think it goes to serve this point, which is that I wrote my dissertation on her, and I was a bit obsessed with her at this point, and I was walking down Bethnal Green Road, and this honestly happened. A limousine pulled up as I walked past a chippy, a fish and chip shop, and Germaine Greer got out, and she walked into the chippy. And I was so overwhelmed by what was happening that I got sort of frozen to the spot, and I got my phone out to call a friend of mine to say, you won't believe who's just got out of the car in front of me. And at that point, a boy on a bike tried to steal my phone. And I was so pumped from seeing Germaine Greer that I wrestled my phone off him and retained it in my possession. I felt that was...
Well, you have to tell Germaine Greer this story.
One day.
God. I thought you were going to shout, fuck off, Germaine Greer's in the chip shop. No. I was stunned into silence. That's such a great story, Catherine.
Shall we move on to your second change to create the world as it should be?
Absolutely. Off you go.
Do you want to talk us through your plans for Dolly Parton to be made president?
I don't really have any plans. I just have a fantasy. I think Dolly is made of good, isn't she? I think if everybody could just be more Dolly.
Oh, and President
the world
Parton
would be a better place. President Parton.
So great.
I mean, really, I'm sorry, eat your heart out, Jed Bartlett. President Parton. I just think, all our dreams would come true at once. But I just think Dolly is a revelation, really. You know, she is a working class woman of immense talent, entirely self-made, spends all her money making other people's lives better, and wore an on-trend shoulder hole top to have her jab.
So great. And turned her song into a vaccine song.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, her literacy work, everything about her. And she's just so unequivocally herself as well. She doesn't give a shit about aging. I was going to say she's lucky she's in a position where she can't be sidelined, but she's not. It's that kind of luck where you work really hard.
Yeah, but she did kind of fall out of the limelight for a little while. And that documentary on her is fascinating because it shows how she had to rethink. She got a new manager and it worked. And then Glastonbury turned so much around for her.
Glastonbury was the moment, wasn't it? She fell out of fashion. I mean, she was never fashionable, actually. She was a very, very successful country singer.
She did it in a very classy way. Her comeback was, I thought, very classy and kind of quiet and just built and built. And I also love the fact she's very open about wearing wigs.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, on the Shift podcast, I ask every guest who their old bird role model is, and she is one of the most frequently chosen.
Is she? That's brilliant. You've said your life philosophy is if someone says you can't, prove them wrong, fight your own battles and admit your mistakes. Do you think that's something Dolly would agree with?
Dolly probably said it before me, to be honest. That actually came from, I had 2 knockbacks when I was a teenager. I mean, I come from a really ordinary background. My dad's a bricklayer, builder. I went to comprehensive school, and it would have been late 70s. There was the careers teacher who was like this grumpy old middle-aged beardy man, and we all had to go to our careers advice session, and he said to me, "What do you want to do?" And at that point in my life, I had just discovered smash hits, and I was so enamored with smash hits. I was in love with it. And I was like, I want to write for smash hits. That's what I want to do, because I thought that all they did on smash hits was like learn song lyrics, or and
meet heartthrobs
and meet Duran Duran, exactly. And he looked at me and he said, "What?" And I was like, "No, I want to be a journalist. I want to work on magazines." And he sneered at me and he said, "Girls like you don't do jobs like that. But if you're lucky, you can be a teacher, and being a teacher is a really, really good and important job. But it was like, a girl like you can't even aspire to that."
Isn't it fascinating? Because that's exactly what he was taught, genuinely what he believed.
Yeah, he did believe it. He didn't. I'm sure that he probably said it to nearly every kid who went in there with any aspiration at all. To be honest, it probably wasn't just a girl thing. But he, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that he.
Have you ever had the chance to tell him what you've been up to?
No. And I'm so old, and he was old then, so he's probably long gone, to be quite honest, Shona.
So who's laughing now? So another of like a striking anecdote that you mentioned in your book centers on when you're raising funds for the Pool, the online magazine that you founded.
Sorry, I'm rocking now.
And you go into a meeting with an affluent man, and he kindly suggests to you, after that you've made your presentation to him, that the next time you bring a man with you to make investors feel more comfortable. That's the line that you quote. I mean, it's a great story. It sort of says a lot without having to go into lots of detail. How do you think Dolly would have dealt with a man like that? And do you think Dolly has made her investors feel uncomfortable in her life?
Dolly doesn't have any investors. Dolly is
Not
the
now,
investor.
yeah.
I mean, I think, Dolly is the epitome, isn't she, of if you want something doing, do it yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are so many things I wish I'd said to that man. And there are many nights, even all these years later, there are many nights I lie awake thinking of things I should have said to that bloke.
But we have all had moments like that when men have said things and it's only afterwards.
Yeah. And the thing that really compounds the story, you say you even thanked him as you left the meeting.
I'm sure I did.
I know, we've all done it.
I said, thank you for your time. I mean, that was just that was the tip of the iceberg, but that particular anecdote illustrates the entire fundraising experience as a woman trying to raise money in a man's world. And my sister-in-law, until recently, worked for one of the great big kind of finance companies. And the other day, she sent me a link to, I think it was the Harvard Business Review, which said that something like women get something like 2%. Women-run businesses get something like 2% of all investment. She was like, "This is so shocking."
Wow.
It's like, Al, this is not new.
Yeah.
This is how it is. I mean, there's like 2018, one investor invested more in WeWork than all the money that was invested in American female-run startups.
Oh my God.
1 year.
Shocking. One
investor and one business. It's so shocking. And things are slowly improving. I mean, Bumble just floated on the stock exchange, and Whitney Wolfhard was the youngest ever female self-made investor. But this kind of brings us back to the youth thing, because I remember when Bumble launched in the UK, and the pool was still alive at that point, and one of the young women who worked for the pool went to the press launch, and she came back and she was like, "Oh my God, it was so exciting! I'm so energized." It was it was all women. I mean, we were all women on the pool at that point as well. She was like, "Yeah, they were all women, and they were all under 30." And I said, here's the thing: it will be really, really revelatory when it's all women and they're not all under 30. Because under 30, that's almost fine. If we've got to have lots of women, let them all be young.
Right. That leads me on to one of my favourite quotes from The Shift, which is, "Never argue with a woman over 40. They are full of rage and sick of everyone's shit."
They are.
And it's such a great quote because it builds up and builds up. So what was the turning point for you? Did you have a trigger where you just thought, right, I've got to do something?
What, pre-pool or after pool, or just
both?
In life?
Yeah, generally. I think maybe also writing The Shift, what made you think, this book needs to be written?
Oh, well, I think female anger is such an interesting thing. And one of the chapters that actually has had the most feedback in The Shift is the one about anger, because it's almost like you may be allowed to be angry as a little girl. And then by the time you're probably 10, you've learned that is not a dumb thing. It's not what good girls do. It's not appropriate behavior. It's not allowed. It's not attractive. Then you go through your adult life, and angry women are hysterical. They're mad cows. It's not allowed. Whereas angry men are forceful and dominant and know their minds. And then menopause hits, perimenopause, really. I suppose what I mean when I say menopause is perimenopause. And you've got all of this suppressed rage, and you just don't know what to do with it.
4 years.
Years worth, actually. And I went through this, certainly a couple of years, where, I mean, my husband said it was like living in a tornado, but I didn't really know. So it's almost, well, what? I think my view is that perimenopause is like a reverse puberty. And so you're going through that kind of puberty maelstrom of hormones, but with all the responsibility and experience and angst of a 50-year-old.
And I think perimenopause is funny though, isn't it? Because one of the symptoms, which is quite common, is sleeplessness, which will then feed into the anger because you just get very tired. And
so all of those things feed into, I mean, there are something like 64 symptoms, and the one that we all know is hot flushes. So it's only really once you start having hot flushes that you think, oh, maybe I'm perimenopause. And all that anxiety and anger and lack of confidence and insomnia and panic attacks, all of those things, and people thinking they've got dementia because they don't know about that, all of those things build up into this kind of great big, and now I'm having pink fog. So that's also a symptom.
But I think the really interesting thing is it really does. It can start, so well before you actually hit menopause, a good 5 years or more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what a lot of women don't know, and I certainly didn't know, that what we call menopause is perimenopause. And menopause is really just one day when you haven't had a period for a year. And then you're kind of post-menopausal with occasional symptoms, or you're taking HRT or however it is you're handling it. But it wasn't until I was through all of that. I was still angry, but my anger was focused, really. And also the pool had collapsed and it's been a very difficult and painful time. And I had also had some therapy, 18 months worth of therapy for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, related to an abusive relationship that I was in my late teens, which I had just really shelved in the back of my mind for 30 years. So all of this kind of combined, and when I came through it, I just thought, how much easier would life have been if I had had the faintest bloody clue what was coming for me?
Yeah, you could have explained what was going on. Did you feel a sense of relief when you did hit the menopause? Did you feel sad?
You know what? I love it here. I love it over here. I love being 54. I highly recommend it. I found certainly my late 40s were really tough. I love being in my 50s. I feel more confident in myself than ever. I feel more, my self-esteem, which has always been a bit of a rocky beast, is probably as good as it's going to get. I've got to kind of touch back onto the anger. I feel like I'm still really angry, but it's really productive and focused. It's not rudderless fury. It's like, I don't like that, and I'm going to do something about it. So, yeah, I think you will find, if you ask a lot of women, certainly older women, women into their 50s and beyond, they love it.
I think that's a really empowering message. I think there is a fear of turning, whether it's 40, definitely turning 50, but I think it's really empowering and positive to hear you say that you love it there, and it's great.
But don't you think society just sidelines older women? So because of that, then you kind of learn to be afraid of getting older, and you start lying about your age. I mean, I remember when I was researching the book and I Googled older women, and honestly, Google doesn't know the difference between older and old. You get Stana stair lifts, and grannies. I mean, that's what you get.
Yeah, this is why we fully endorse your Dolly for president as an exemplar older woman who can also connect. She really connects with young people. So
how old is she? I don't even know.
She's 75.
See, she's only 4 years. She's 2 years older than Trump. I'm making the sign for cross here, and at 4 years younger than Biden. Go for it, Dolly. Dolly,
Absolutely.
Hear our plea.
Well, and also, I don't know if you heard last month that Dolly's from Tennessee, and she asked for plans. They were planning to put a statue of her up in the Capitol in Tennessee, and she asked that they stop debating that and just the comparison between her humbleness. She said, given all that's going on in the world, I don't think putting me on a pedestal is appropriate. That's funny, it's witty, it's humble, it's the opposite of the narcissism and self-referentiality of Trump and so many men that get to be powerful, political
I remember
players.
reading that and thinking Trump would have asked for 2. He would have been like, why just 1?
It's interesting as well, though, isn't it? Because it also shows a real understanding of what society's like. And once someone's on a pedestal, especially a woman, there's only one way they're going, and it's down.
Yeah.
And it didn't sound like her answer didn't sound like it wasn't what she was saying. She wasn't saying it to be what everyone wanted to hear. I think it was very genuine. I think she just genuinely thought it's not appropriate right now. Yeah. But she did say, when I'm gone, go for it. So
yeah, I mean, this word has been ruined, but she really is authentic, isn't it? She is absolutely,
yeah, for an incredibly inauthentic physical
essentially
being.
Dolly.
She is really is. Yeah, we love her. We're fully behind this motion that
we love Dolly. Now, I'm going to move on to your third answer, and because I started imagining what Dolly would be like in a world where she might have to, but she might have Zooms every day. Because your third answer was you'd create a Zoom where you don't have to look at yourself.
Oh God, I honestly think that's the problem with Zoom. I mean, also that it's boring and you have to concentrate and put your hand up, and there are so many things wrong with it.
It's exhausting. I mean, there is Zoom fatigue as an actual thing now, I think.
Yes, and there was some research I read earlier in the week which did say that one of the reasons that Zoom is so tiring is because you have to look at yourself all day, every day, and that is not a natural state of being, is it? Other people have to look at you. And I don't know, does Zoom, I wish bad luck, but does Zoom do the mirror flip? So are you looking at a mirror image or are you looking at a photographic image?
Yes.
Do you know?
I find this really confusing as well because it does a mirror flip. So when you look in a mirror, you see the Zoom version of yourself. But if you play back a Zoom recording, you see yourself in real life as how people see you. And it just blows my mind.
That's a bit Black Mirror, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's different. So really it should be easier to look at the mirror version of yourself than the real life version of yourself.
So do you turn your camera off?
No, because I think, it helps conversation, doesn't it, to be able to see people. But, everybody, I mean, I did a Zoom board meeting yesterday with someone and there were 12 of us there. And I think probably, and it wasn't a male-female thing, actually, it was everybody. But literally at some point, everybody commented on their own appearance, their hair and I think you do, well, maybe it's just me, but I spend a lot of time looking at myself and thinking, why didn't I put any makeup on? Why am I wearing that jumper? Why does my hair do that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, God, I'm going really grey at the front and you can really see it on that camera.
But I think it's partly awkwardness because there's these gaps when some people are frozen and some people are delayed or someone has tech issues. There's all this pressure to kind of fill silence. So I think a lot of that is kind of, oh, my God, look at my hair, or I don't know. I just find it so awkward sometimes.
I'm happy to look at everybody else. I just don't want to look at me.
Yeah. It's kind of an extension of the social media world that we live in, isn't it? Where you feel like you have to curate your appearance. So you have to organize your backdrop so you don't look disorganized. You have to, it's weird. And you know loads about, you're super aware of kind of the challenges of how women particularly are policed in relation to their appearance. Do you think creating a Zoom where you don't have to look at yourself will be better for women, or is it a gender neutral advancement?
Maybe men I know aren't representative. I think it's quite gender neutral, I think, although I do think the kind of Zoom earrings and wearing a nice Zoom blouse and whatever. Not that I ever do any of those things, but I know people who do. Asking for a friend. Those I haven't heard any men talking about that, I have to say.
About their Zoom blouses.
Yeah. But so it would be good if you could turn your camera off for you, but not for them. Yeah. Which is something, surely Zoom can just do that and do a bug fix. I think that this fantasy of mine can come.
I bet Dolly would sort it out. I bet she would. But talking
I think
of
we
Zoom,
may be asking too much of Dolly here.
I don't think she wants to be president. But do you have a special Zoom background? Like a lot of people sit. I mean, publishing, we have a lot of meetings, and a lot of us are in front of our bookshelves because that's genuinely where we are working. Do you have a special background? And I wanted to ask about your bookshelves because everyone is a bit obsessed with colour coordination. Do you colour coordinate your books?
No, I don't colour coordinate. We'll get on to colour coordination in a minute. I find it a bit annoying. That I have, where I sit, my back is actually to a door. So if you could see me now, you'd just be able to see a door and a wall. But when if I'm hosting an event where, a book event or interviewing someone for public consumption, then I'll slightly turn round so that it's not the most comfortable, but it does mean that my bookshelves are behind me. But the bookshelves in my office office, the room where I work, are pretty untidy, I've got to say, because they're my books that come in and go out, and it's I've just tidied. I don't know why I tidied it up, and you haven't got a video running, so it was all for naught.
Oh, sorry. We could have had those minutes back.
You could always send us a photo. We can put it on the website.
I'll send you a photo so you can see how tidy they are.
I just wanted to ask you to segue seamlessly from your Zoom where you don't have to look at yourself, which, by the way, I think is totally doable. And I hope Zoom are listening, because I think they'd have a lot of customers for this. You've always had a gift for sensing a gap in the market. Through
a gap, yes.
You've always had a gap. Sorry, you've always had a gift for sensing a gap in the market. What are you looking at next? Is there anything else that you think you want to pinpoint? What are the projects that you're writing? Are you writing 2 books at the moment? Is that madness?
Yeah, I was thinking, how can you write 2 books at the same time?
Well, the truth is I'm not actually writing either of them, but I should be writing 2. But lockdown really has eaten my brain this time. I'm really struggling. Yeah. I think it's because it's been a year.
You're not the only one, really. It's a collective slump right now, I think.
Yeah, it's that whole. Anyway, so there's a non-fiction and fiction. So I'm trying to get my fiction brain back. The non-fiction is, well, I don't want to jinx it really, but the shift really. It really did take off in a way that I kind of hadn't really anticipated, particularly the podcast. I mean, I knew that there was a need because everybody I spoke to was like, oh, I'm this sort of age. I'm kind of north of 40. I don't know what's coming for me. But also, I just want to hear voices of other older women. So, I mean, I absolutely love doing the podcast because I love nosing into the lives of, other older women. So, whether I kind of tend to cut off at about 40, but I'll go as old as it gets. And, the most recent episode that's just come out was Isabel Allende, who is 79 and has been in self-imposed exile for best part of 50 years. She was so fascinating. I could have spoken to her all day, so that's a real gift. So I'm working around that. And I'm also working on one of the other things, apart from anger, that was really popular in the book was older women's attitude to sex and relationships. So I'm doing more work around that. So at the moment. Or not doing it, actually, but hypothetically doing it.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that that's been something that's really kind of hit a nerve, because it's so little written about. It's even reading your book, I was kind of not shocked, but it sort of it makes you kind of stop and realize I've never read this kind of material before. That makes it sound really dirty. I'm not, but do you know what I mean? It's kind of content that we're not accustomed to hearing about those experiences, the things that happen to women's bodies post 18, really. So yeah, it's I'm not surprised that that's kind of provoked a very belated conversation.
Well, we only talk about, like as you just said, women's bodies in puberty. And in childbirth, and that's kind of it. So there was that whole there's that whole chapter about vaginal atrophy. It's a thing, you need to know about it. So there's that chapter, but also the chapter about love and sex and relationships. I did a kind of a straw poll of my focus group, which at that point was about 50 women. And the percentage, I mean, it was something like 80% of the women who responded either had divorced from their husband in their 40s or 50s or wanted to.
Wow.
And it was really shocking, actually, how dissatisfied.
Yeah, but also terrifying for men. Those are scary stats if you're a married straight man, aren't they?
Well, yeah, you'd think, but some of them may be oblivious, some of them maybe don't care. I think, I don't know, or maybe they just think there'll be a younger one along in a minute. don't know. But it's that kind of classic thing how men give themselves 9 out of 10, don't they? And women.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I just have one last question, which is, when you were doing all this research and all these things were coming up that's so interesting, do you miss being a journalist and putting it all down? And do you miss working in the magazine sector?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think I loved writing The Shift because it was so much about being a journalist. It's very, very different writing experience to writing fiction, as you can imagine. Yeah, I don't miss all the pain of running a magazine or a website and the, fundraising and management and all of that. But I I absolutely loved the morning conference where you would get, 5 or 10 people together and they would, pool their thoughts on the day's events. And then, you would kind of mix it all up in a bowl and then come out with 7 or 8 pieces that were the product of all those people's minds. I mean, yeah, I often, I go through all the news and the sites I always look at every morning, and I do often think, I'd take that there, and this is what I'd do with that. But then I set up a Substack thinking, oh, well, I'll write a newsletter and I'll do that several days a week. And of course, I've set it up. It's got, every so often I get a follower and I think, oh, shit, I need to do something about that.
So looking back, do you think you would give someone advice if 30 years old, say, woman starting out and, journalist, but not really knowing what to do next? From your experience, is there anything you would have done vastly differently that you would offer as a golden tip?
Oh, God, I would just spend a lot less time worrying about what other people think. I mean, really, I don't mean be an arsehole and trample all over people, but I've wasted so much time worrying about what people think, worrying about what people thought about that thing that I did that can't be changed anyway. You can't affect what people think about you. I mean, you can to a certain extent, but I think I wasted, months of my life, worrying about other people's opinions of me. And I think that that's very, very common, certainly for women, of slightly older women, but I think younger women too. And that would be the number one. And also to kind of trust your gut. How do I put it? How's the best way to put it? I just think that you're not always going to be right and you're not always going to be wrong. And that's fine. But there are a lot of people who just carry on through life. And I don't want to make this a gender thing, but I think it's a lot more women than men do this. A lot, who don't trust their gut, don't go with what they think. Someone else puts a counter opinion and they think, oh, well, he's probably right. Or they put their opinion more forcefully. And then the number of times I have kind of bitten my tongue or thought, oh, well, I'm probably wrong, that I really wish I hadn't. I think if I had had that kind of insight at 30, there were probably quite a few things I would have done differently, or sooner, maybe just sooner.
You quote someone in the book, I'm just trying to remember who it was, who says sort of sums it up by saying, you spend a certain amount of time when you're younger worrying about what people have said, and then you realise no one's thinking about you at all. And that's Elizabeth
Gilbert.
That's it. Yeah.
I've actually got that quote on my wall. It's stuck above my desk. It's we all spend our 20s and 30s trying so hard to be perfect because we're so worried about what people will think of us. Then we get into our 40s and 50s and we finally start to be free because we decide that we don't give a damn what anyone thinks of us. But you won't be completely free until you reach your 60s and 70s, when you finally realise this liberating truth. Nobody was ever thinking about you anyhow.
That's brilliant.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to The World as It Should Be. We hope it inspires you to work towards shaping the world as you think it should be. You can find out more about Prima Donna Festival by going to primadonnafestival.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us 5 stars on iTunes and leave us a review. Tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify too and all good platforms.
The World as It Should Be from Prima Donna.